Before we get into this video, I just wanted to let you know a quick answer to one of the really commonly asked questions as of late, which is what game am I using to play Vanguard on? This game is called Tabletop Simulator, which is available on Steam. It's on sale really often, both during stuff like the Steam summer sales, but also on stuff like Humble Bundle. You can usually find it for half price and stuff like that, so do look out for those deals because normally it's 20 bucks retail, but it's usually 10 bucks on sale. If you want to know how to set up Vanguard on it, it's quite easy. I do have a guide to it linked in every description where I do use the game, and there is also a plugin that has been made for the Reboot that you also find in the description that you just need to install, and you don't have to build any decks because you actually have all of the Reboot cards loaded into the mod, so it's quite easy to get started immediately. Now that that's done with, let's get into today's video. So we're going to get into today's video right off the bat, which is going to be taking a look at some budget decks from V-BT01 for each clan. I'd also like to give a quick shout out to Maximilian Fansuri from the Indonesian Vanguard Club, as he also made his own budget builds for every single clan, and I did draw some ideas from his list as well, and therefore I would like to thank him for some of his ideas. And at the end of each of my budget suggestions, I'm also going to show what he shows so that you folks also have something else to work off of. So as you can see, we're going to begin with Royal Paladin, and this is my budget build for Royals. The general rule that I go with these budget builds is to try to minimize on the amount of foils to still have a deck that can work and still have a win condition. And even for at least one of the foils in here, I'm going to try to explain a way that you can cut it even if you want to remain even more budget. But we're going to quickly go over the deck. It's going to be less detailed than the deck previews because there's obviously a bit less time. So in terms of what you're going to need is, first you're going to need to buy one of the trial decks because that's where you get your Alfred Earlys, your Blaster Blades, and a lot of the cards that you see here, like this, all of this is all you need a trial deck for. Then from the actual set, in terms of foils, the first one of which is going to be our Wincon, which is Soul Saver Dragon. This is important because even though you won't be able to use her skill as fast, because stuff like Alfred does technically lose a soul from calling a Blaster Blade from your soul, you're still going to be able to deliver the Wincon pretty fast. So you don't have King of Knights Alfred, but you still do have a pretty stable engine going for you. And while it may take 1 or 2 turns more to deliver the finishing blow with Soul Saver, it's still a workable and good Wincon. Followed by, we have our 4 Blaster Blades from the trial deck that you should have once you buy even one trial deck, and then 4 Akanes, which is our other foil, which is... she's also not that expensive. I should also mention that Soul Saver right now is at about 5 bucks, whereas the Akane is a little bit more, like 7-ish. So I think all foils considered, it might set you back close to 40 bucks. So with the trial deck, you're looking at something like 50, 55 or so. The prices do fluctuate, so you know, when you're watching this video it may have changed, but Akane is important because her role is to thin your deck, get yourself an extra unit on the field, as well as lead into a soul charge and make really nice numbers. So Akane you will need eventually regardless, so she is an important unit. Moving along, we do have our 3 Jarons from the trial deck, and then 4 Pongals, which is just a rare, so he should not cost you much. When he's called, you soul charge 1, if it's a trigger you get plus 5k. Very important for that soul charge because we need it for the Soul Saver Dragon, so therefore that's how the Wincon becomes a bit easily approachable in that way. Then we have the 4 grade 1 Perfect Guards from the trial deck that you can easily run, and then the 4 Allens from the trial deck as well, because we do not put Marin in this to avoid the amount of, just the amount of expenses for a budget deck, but we still are able to plus a little bit by calling from our hand and also getting that 11k swing. That way we can still make magic numbers with our other grade 1, which is Morgana. I put in 2 of her for now, but you can adjust it to have more. She's just a rare, so also should be quite accessible. Then these are all units from the trial deck. We have our Gleim starter, our 4 normal draw triggers, our 8 criticals that you get in the starter deck, and the 4 heals. Now, there are some exceptions where, let's say Akane might be a bit too expensive for you, in which case I would suggest playing Funelgal, which doesn't have the same role, but it does convert a Counterblast into a Soul Charge, which is sort of what Akane does. She converts a Counterblast into a unit on the field, and a deck thin, and a Soul Charge, but because if you want to go even more budget, you can play Funelgal to still be able to hit for some numbers and also get that soul charge which you need for your soul saver. So if you can't afford the Akanes, I suggest possibly playing Funelgal. And then these other grade 1 options are actually there after we go over your priority list. So these 3 cards are your 3 priorities in terms of what to buy next. So you've built your budget deck, but you do probably want to update it to be more competitive. So these are the order of cards that I suggest going in. So first, you should really invest in Draw Trigger Perfect Guards. These cards are really amazing because they don't take away from your grade 1 space, but they're still a Perfect Guard and they're a Draw Trigger, and Draw Triggers normally our 5k shield, which is very, very low. However, once you put in the 4 draw trigger perfect guards, and by the way, you don't need to immediately put 4, you could start off by 1 or 2, just pick them up as time goes on, and it's going to slowly improve. But as you put them in, you're going to start seeing more space in your grade 1 lineup, which is where I suggest either playing maybe Wingle or Lion Mane Stallion before you can afford the main grade 1 for the deck, which is in the booster set. So continuing on, once you have your draw perfect shields, I suggest investing in the VR that is King of Knights Alfred. Even if you pick up 1 or 2, it's going to make a drastic change in your deck, because then you can start cutting away the Alfred earlies and playing the King of Knights Alfred, saving your soul for your soul savers and using up the counterblast to call the blaster blades, and overall having more consistency in power and units on the field as well. So even if you pick up 1 or 2, you know, slowly but surely, it's definitely going to improve your deck, and that's enough to start things off. Finally, once you have that, or if you manage to find them cheap enough, you should pick up Little Sage Marin. You can pick this up beforehand, I think, as well, or if you've managed to find them cheaper than any of the others, then you can pick up Marin first. You can easily take out Alan, because Alan is basically there to serve the role of Marin, but Marin does it better. So Marin is important 4 of in the deck as well, so these are the 3 cards you'll be buying towards as you build up your deck. And if you want to see the full version, the full competitive version of what the deck should look like, you can check out my deck preview of the Alfred deck, and that might be something that you can model it off. But this is basically what you can start off with by just buying a trial deck, buying a few rares, and then buying 2 triple rares 4 times, and that's it. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a pointer, and when you're taking out your perfect shields, you can also put in either Wingle or Lion Mane Stallion as you go along and take out some cards that you don't need, such as Alan, etc. So that's going to be it for the Royal segment, and this is the Indonesia Vanguard Cardfight Club suggestions. So there are some similarities, but here Akane and Funagal are played side by side, and the grade 1s do differ a little bit as well, but the cards to buy next do stay the same. The next trial deck clan we're going to be taking a look at is going to be Kagero, so once again you're going to be starting off with the trial deck and then buying up the new pieces. So the trial deck cards that we have are going to be Overlord, Nahalem, the Perfect Guard, the Bar, and the starter as well as the triggers. So here we have a little bit more foils, but these foils are really essential and it's really hard to find other replacements for them. So we're going to go over this first. So we have our 4 Overlords, which are sort of your boss. His on-hit skill is alright, but honestly one of his really big threats is that you can actually have him be a 23k attacker on the rearguard circle, but you do need quite a bit of soul for that in order to do it every turn, especially if he's both on your Vanguard and rearguard circle. Therefore we have Cruel Dragon, who's a double rare in the set, who, when you retire one of your opponent's rearguards, you can call him during the main phase, even if your Vanguard is grade 2 or less. But do keep in mind, I did make this mistake before, that this can only be called in your main phase. So if you retire something in the battle phase with Spillover Dragon, for example, you will not be able to call him during the battle phase. It's only in the main phase. But when his attack hits a Vanguard, you can return him to your hand and Soul Charge 1, therefore fueling the Soul Blast cost for Dragonic Overlord. That is all for our grade 3s. For grade 2s, we play 4 of the trial deck Nahalem, and then 4 of the triple rare Berserk Dragon, which is honestly a very, very important unit for Kagero, and it's really hard to find a different replacement for him, because he doesn't just retire, he also draws you cards and makes good numbers. Therefore, it's good to prioritize getting the 4 Berserks as soon as possible. Following that, we have our last grade 2, that is Spillover Dragon, which is just a common, so should be overall quite easy to get. Then we have our other triple rare, which is 4 Flame of Hope Airmo. Again, very hard to replace because this is the only card that counter charges, which means that it's the only card that can flip your Counterblast, the face down damage in your damage zone, back face up. And so therefore it's very important, because this will stay in your deck forever essentially, and so it's good to invest in it early because it's going to be there forever. So if you can try to get it, it's normally between $5 and $7. Same with Berserk, it might go up to $8 or $9, so it's a little bit more expensive. Cruel Dragon shouldn't be more than $1 or $2, and therefore overall not that expensive, but Kagero is definitely the one that's a little bit more pricey than the rest of these budget decks. Then we have 4 of the trial deck Perfect Guards, followed by 3 Ropias, as well as 3 bars that you get from the trial deck, whereas Ropia is a rare in the booster set that gets plus 5k every time you retire one of your opponent's rearguards during your turn. Then we have our starter Undo that you get in the trial deck, as well as the usual triggers that you get in the trial deck as well. So this is the budget deck, and now when we go over the actual suggestions and things that you should be buying next. First of all, obviously, is gonna be the draw trigger perfect shields, just like with the last one. Here we do play the grade 1 perfect shields, but when you start putting in your draw trigger perfect shields, you can easily start putting up the Ropia to 4 put up your bar to 4, and then slowly maybe invest in your last grade 1 slot, which is going to be Dragonic Gaius, or it can also be something else such as the Burge or the Gojo from the trial deck as well. Following that, we are going to have Dragonic Waterfall, the VR of the set. You do need 4 of it because it's the real threat in Kagero, and therefore you do need to invest into 4. It's around 20 bucks, so it is quite pricey, but even if you have 1 or 2, it definitely will make a difference. And finally, Dragonic Gaius, you only really need 2 or 3 of him, and therefore it's not as much of a priority because there are other grade 1s you can also play, but as a last little finish, I think Dragonic Gaius is definitely worth investing into, and he's overall not that expensive. The draw trigger perfect cards overall are usually between 5 to 7 bucks. VRs tend to be around 20 except for Perfect Riser, and Dragonic Gaius should only be around 2 or 3, so it's not all that expensive. So this is the Kagero budget build, and now looking at the Indonesia Vanguard Cardfight Club's list, it is quite similar except for a few ratios, such as Spillover being played at 4 there, and Bar only being played at 2, which I do think is a little bit different than what I present, but the lists are overall very similar, and so are the suggested cards to buy next. Moving on into our first clan that is not from trial decks is going to be Oracle Think Tank, so this will be entirely built up from the booster set, but should still be around, if not less, 50 bucks. Getting into it, we have our first triple rare, which is CEO Amaterasu, which is going to be your boss card for the meantime. She's going to let you build up power every time you use an effect to look at the deck, as well as also give you some extra cards in terms of advantage. And then we're going to use our win condition, which is Victorious Deer, to try and ride a couple times, and then be able to set up that win con of 2 crits at the top of the deck, and a plus 10k buff to the rest of the field. So with them in unison, you should be able to overall draw quite a few cards and still set up a win con even at the 4 Victorious Deers, which will be normally cut to 2 in the competitive build. Then going along, I have 4 Promised Daughters, in my opinion one of the best grade 2s in the clan, and especially units, and so Kagero really can't do much about her because she just can't be retired, so they can't target her, and she also attacks for 15k when you have 4 or more cards in hand, which is a really easy condition to meet. Then we have 3 memes, which will help you build up power on your Amaterasu, whether it's on Vanguard or Rearguard Circle, and then we have 4 Sotori Hime, which will help you set up your deck and also filter through very quickly, and does have some bombastic art as well. Then we run the 4 grade 1 perfect cards, which are Rote Megas, so this is the grade 1 one. And then we run 4 of our 5 Megas to once again build up more power on our CEO Amaterasu. 4 Oracle Guardian Gemini to refund all the counterblast that you're using on CEO Amaterasu, as well as Sotori Hime, which will be almost every single turn. And finally 2 Luckbirds to Soul Blast the additional cards in the Soul to draw an extra card and build up some power. We have Lozenge Megas as our starter, and then the 4 normal draw triggers, the 8 criticals, and the 4 heals. So this is the general layout of the deck, and now let's go into what you can buy next to upgrade this deck. First of all, once again, the draw trigger perfect guards. As you put in the draw trigger perfect guards, you're going to be changing up your grade 1 lineup here and there, but the best thing to also change into is going to be Circle Magus, which is your second target, which lets you filter through the deck by putting grade 2s and above that you drive check under the deck to draw an extra card, and also get you an extra card on the second turn, because when you're right on top of her, you kind of also want to draw one card, which is really good. And finally, it's going to be the VR of the set, which is going to be Imperial Daughter. So she's going to cost you about 20 to 25, but she is really good in that she gets the extra crit when you're right on top of a grade 3, she helps you build up power on your field, and overall is really strong in setting up your soul as well as the general game. So these in my opinion are the 3 targets. You really want to go in this order, I think. You can also play 3 Imperial Daughters if you can't afford the 4th one, and then you just keep putting down the counts of Victorious Deer instead, but Amaterasu will stay as a 4, and so will Promised Daughter, so they are foils that are good to invest into. So this deck has 4 triples and 8 double rares, whereas the updates are another double rare and 1 triple and 1 VR. So that is it for my version of the Oracle Think Tank deck. And now looking at the other variant, it is quite different because it actually doesn't have the Promised Daughter, and it does have a different grade 1 lineup as well, but it does already have the grade 1 perfect shields because according to them it's more important to have it that way. But I think with the way that the deck works, I think it's fine to run the grade 1s too. Here the buy list goes over Promised Daughter first, then Silent Tom, which I think is no longer necessary in the deck, but then they suggest Imperial Daughter, and only then Circle Magus, which I think takes precedence over Imperial Daughter. So in this one the lists are a bit different. And finally, getting into the last clan, I'm going to preface this by saying that Nova Grappler is overall very budget friendly and that you can pick up basically the whole deck for about 60 bucks, even with the upgrades that I mentioned included. But if you want to go really budget, this is one of the options that you can even go even more budget with, but I'm going to go over this one already first. So we have 4 triple rares and 4 double rares, and that's it for the foils. So let's go over it real quick. First we have a Sure Kaiser at 4, who when you drive check a grade 2 or greater lets you stand a rearguard, and if it's a grade 3 you can count almost 1 to give it plus 10k. So it's a bit more luck based, but it still does the job that Perfect Riser wants to do. Then we run the 4 Battledore Fighter, which is our hero. He puts on a lot of pressure to your opponent by forcing them to guard twice at the same time, and if you combine it with Burst Riser, they're gonna have to do it twice, so it's really strong. Burst Riser is a 4 of, in my opinion, one of the really good cards for Nova Grappler in this set, followed by 4 Boomerang Thrower, who is also a hero race, who lets you both countercharge, so flip up the damage, and also soul charge, so helping you with the resources that you need for cards like this, and basically everything. Then we have 4 Cup Bowler, which is our hero. He's normally a 9k, but during your turn if you have another hero, then he gets another plus 5k, both on Vanguard and Rearguard Circle. Then we have our grade 1 Vanilla Death Army guy, which is a 9k, which is really good if you ride him first, because your opponent will normally not be able to reach him without having to call an extra booster, which is really nice. Then we have the 3 Trance Riser, which helps us get even more countercharge going on, and he also has the Riser name. Followed by 4 Jet Riser, which builds up a lot of power by calling him first and then calling a lot of other units after that. Finally, we have 4 Rocket Hammerman, who when he boosts a hero, which we have quite a few of, such as Cup Bowler, or Boomerang Thrower, or Battledore Fighter, so when you boost any of them, you can Soul Blast one to give him an extra 5k, so overall has a lot of nice power, and so this is what's sort of called the hero engine. Then we have Battle Riser as our starter, and as you'll notice, I actually play the Draw Trigger Perfect Guards in this list because that's our only other foil, and I think it's really important to play at least 6 draw, 6 front in this deck. So we're in 4 of the Perfect Guard draws, 2 of the normal draws, and then 6 of the front triggers and 4 heal triggers. So that's what you might want to start out with, but what you might also want to consider is the following 2 cards. So instead of, if you really want to go super budget and have a deck that's basically not costing you much, you can put Miss Splendor in as well, but then you won't be standing units that much with a Sure Kaiser, and you're going to solely rely on Battle Riser. So I think that's not really sufficient because Battledore Fighter doesn't stand units on his own, but you could potentially cut one of each to include 2 Miss Splendor if you wish to do that. So I wish to mention that. And then Iron Killer is played in the final competitive build, but in that case you might not want to use the hero engine. So for now I think it's fine to have it this way, and then once you start upgrading then you can put in Iron Killer instead of, for example, Cup Bowler. Going over the upgrades, these are all really cheap because first we're going to have our grade 1 that is Riser Custom, in my opinion the most important one, because when you rearguard in the same column as this unit stands, you also stand him. So you don't just get a fresh attack going, you get a fresh attack with a boost going, which is really important. His first skill isn't that important because he lets you attack even if you go first, but you don't get the drive and you lose a card in your hand for the soul, so it's overall not that good, but that second skill is very important. Then we have High Power Riser Custom, who when placed lets you call a Battle Riser from the soul, which is the only form of advantage in the whole clan right now. And then if he hits, you can almost 1 and put a Battle Riser into your soul from your rearguard circle and stand one of your other rearguards, letting you attack once again with something else. Finally, we have the VR, which is Perfect Riser, which is in my opinion the most important one because it lets you stand 2 rearguards, which means 2 extra attacks, and if he hits, he also lets you countercharge, so overall the best one. These are both $1/€1 to 2 each. So you want 4 of each, and then Perfect Riser is about 10 bucks I think. So again, it shouldn't be that expensive, and you can start off again with Perfect Risers the same, buy 1 or 2 or 3, and you're already gonna see the difference as it goes on. So that is it for my last budget deck, and this is one you see in Indonesia, which is actually basically the same in terms of main deck. It's just the next to buy that are a bit different, where they say that you should buy Perfect Riser next, but Perfect Riser is also a bit more expensive in English than he was in Japan, so that's why it's a little bit different. But as I said, you can really play around with the grade 2 and the grade 3 lineups, and don't forget that this deck is overall really cheap because this really isn't going to cost you more than 20-30 bucks for the budget version, and then even the fully updated one is going to be like 60 to 70, like tops 80. So even then, it's very budget and a very strong deck as well. So thank you very much for watching this budget video. I hope it helps out some of you players with a tighter budget. You know, I used to be the same in the past as well, and I hope that the steps to, you know, what to build next kind of helps as well as the other list that I showed you from Indonesia. So I think overall there's quite a few resources that you can go off of, and I hope they do help out. If you have any questions regarding the game or the decks or anything, do feel free to leave them in the comments, or any other suggestions that you have in terms of budget decks. And if you have a budget version of yourself or a certain budget that you have but you still want to build a deck, you can always ask for help on which cards to prioritize in case it comes down to really picking and choosing. So I hope this video was helpful to you guys. Do let me know what you guys think as always, and of course don't forget to hit the bell button as well as check out the social medias in the description and join the Discord channel if you haven't already. For this game, Tabletop Simulator, we do have a bit of a player community going on in my Discord channel, so if you want some opponents, it's probably best to look over there. But on that note, that's gonna be it for me today. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.